stuttered for most of my life. I think my parents told me that I started to stutter somewhere around three or four. I've been in quite a bit of speech therapy myself, growing up in college as well. And like I said, I primarily work within the public schools now.
Uh, I can go after Tim. Hi, my name is Ja here. I see some of the familiar faces. If you have heard of my introductions before, I apologize. You have to hear it again. So I am Ja, and I'm originally from China, and I am a person who stutters. And I would say like I grew up in China. I spent most of my life there. I didn't receive any speech therapy until I came to the States for my graduate school. And the only way I used to cope with my stuttering is what was by hiding my stuttering, like all types of covert behaviors. Any covert behavior that's listed in a textbook, that was my experience. So I started to come out of the closet a couple of years after I came to the States, after I received some speech therapy and counseling. And that was the most difficult decision and the best decision I've ever made, is to come out of the stuttering closet. And right now I am a first year PhD student at Michigan State University after Seth left, after a year he left. So, and I'm absolutely enjoy what I'm doing right now, learning about stuttering. And I'm so glad to be here. And thank you, Courtney, for having me on this panel.
You want to go next, Tiffany? Hi, everyone. My name is Seth Tishner. I'm someone who stutters. Like Courtney said, I'm an SLP. My main job, though, I'm an assistant professor at Duquesne University here in Pittsburgh, finishing my second year. So yeah, most of my job now is research, with some teaching thrown in. I uh, uh, with some stuttering therapy thrown in on the side, not a lot, mostly just things I want to do because I enjoy it. My job now is mostly I sit around and think about stuttering all day, and I write some of it down. So it's a fun life. My story, I guess, in a nutshell, which is really interesting because it intersects with the topic of this webinar, is, what matters most in therapy. The therapy I had as a kid was awful, right? Like, it was very fluency focused. It was, hey, say this again until you're magically not someone who stutters, which never worked, and it only made me internalize lots of negative things. Um, I, I, Having had those experiences, I don't know how I ended up doing what I do. I think about this all the time, right? I don't know how that happened, but I'm really glad it did, right? Because it also allowed me to work through a lot of the things I hadn't worked through at the time, right? And things I didn't really work through until I was later college into grad school, so mid 20s. Not that stuttering is not hard now. certainly sometimes it is, right? But more holistic therapy has certainly helped. That's me. All right, Tiffany, you're up.
All right, I'll go last, I guess. I don't know why, like, I still get so nervous. Like, I've done so many of these, but I'm like sitting here being like, I have to introduce myself, even though like everyone knows that I stutter. Anyway, so I'm a Tiffany. My pronouns are she, her. I work I'm an SLP and I work in private practice. I actually just opened my own private practice, so I'm here right now. I just like moved into the space like a week ago. So I just started like a big like group practice, like for multidisciplinary therapy. So I do that as well. I'm a PhD student. I just finished my last class for my coursework and eventually will probably finish my PhD. My research is mostly on covert stuttering and the intersectional like aspects of being a marginalized person in society. So a little bit about my story with stuttering is that, sorry, this is my friend and my business partner's puppy. This is our therapy puppy. Her name is Ruby. She's deaf, so this is her name sign. So I didn't know that I stuttered until I was probably 17. I was very covert, but it was one of those things that like, I think my parents probably, like everyone knew something was wrong. Like I basically just like cried if someone talked to me. So, but I also had like a lot going on in my life. So there were a lot of negative experiences that made a lot of things hard. So I didn't have any therapy at all, any support for anything really, until I was about 17. And then I had a word for it. And then I had really bad therapy. So I was like, I went into therapy being completely fluent. Like I was totally avoidant, didn't have any stuttering overtly, and then learned all these strategies that made me fluent, even though I already was. So that's kind of why I became a speech therapist, is I realized that maybe there's something that's better than that. And there was, and I had better therapy after that. So yeah, that's a little bit about my story, but yeah, feel free to ask questions.
So they have all shared a little bit about themselves. So if anyone has questions, feel free to pop them in the chat, or you can just unmute yourself and talk. But while we wait for questions, if you all, and I know this is a really challenging question, but if you all can maybe share like 1 or 2 points about what you think really matters in stuttering therapy.
I guess I'll go first, even though I went last time. I'll tell you what doesn't matter is fluency. And like I think the kind of opposite of that is what really matters is like being able to like love and accept yourself as a person, as a marginalized person, understanding the nuance of that, of what stuttering means to you as an identity, what that means to you as you move through the world, and how that impacts you. But I think what's really important is understanding that you are not the problem. The society operates in its way, and the impacts that we feel are because of that. And the ways that we have to cope with that are because of that. But that that fluency, like passing as fluent, is not the only way that you can cope with that.
I think it's an interesting question because I think it's less about what I think matters in stuttering therapy and more so what the person I am working with thinks matters to them, and what do they seek to gain from speech, the therapy. And like I I work a lot with kids being in these schools, and it's always so interesting to me because I make a purpose to meet as many kids who stutter in my school county as I can. So I travel a lot to a lot of different schools, and I collaborate a lot with their speech, the therapists that they have now. And I've had countless times where I'll ask a child, well, what do you want from speech? And they've never had anybody ask them that question. And it's always so insightful in what their responses are, right? And you ask a child who stutters, what is your goal for speech therapy? More likely than not, they're going to say, oh, well, my goal is to stop stuttering, right? And then it's sometimes as easy as just listening to what they have to say and then asking why. Oh, I want to stop stuttering so I can have friends. Oh, well, why is stuttering holding you back from having friends? Oh, because it makes me feel this way. And because I feel this way, then I can't do this thing. Oh, well, how can we try to achieve that goal to get together? And it's just really about listening to the person you're working with and not having a preconceived notion of what their rugby should be. And I always think a lot of what is my intent behind the advice I'm giving someone, and what is the intent of the person that I am working with, and things that they say and things that they do, if that may make sense.
Yeah, I think I resonate a lot with what you just said there, Tim. That matches, I think, what I was going to say in a lot of ways. I mean, I spend a lot of time harping on fluency. It's just what I do. That said, right, what I do in therapy still frequently is a lot of fluency stuff just because it is what folks walk in wanting, right? And I think the most important thing in therapy is meeting the client where they are, right? We as therapists, we get into trouble when we don't really listen, when we don't really have empathy, where we don't really meet someone where they are, right? And we think we can solve things or throw strategies out them or just fix stuff, which, like everyone on this call knows, uh, living with stuttering more easily is a journey, right? And wherever you are with that, right, your therapist should meet you there and help you along that journey, right? So, like, lots of times in therapy, I have folks who will come in, wanting not to stutter. Sure, that makes sense. Like therapy lots of times sort of looks like controlled failure in a ways. Oh, really? Gee, that's not working? Why not? Let's have a conversation about that. Let's um, let's think through this and talk through it, right? And maybe there's other ways, which there are, that we can do things differently, right? So it's about walking along someone, right? It's this relationship, I think, that has to be there for effective change to happen. The only other thing I was going to say was, uh, for good therapy, well, maybe from the viewpoint of someone who maybe hasn't had the best therapy, right? So I'm thinking of me in high school. I mean, a speech therapist wouldn't, like I wouldn't let them 10 feet from me, right? When I was younger. So like someone, like me, who was very tainted with the experiences I had with therapy, I think my challenge for them would be that not all therapy, is necessarily what you think it is either, right?
Well said. So like to me, I think I basically, my personal journey, I think like I completed that cycle from like extreme shame. I would do everything to hide my identity as a person who stutters. At the beginning of my therapy, all I want was fluency. It's just like I feel broken my entire life. Just fix me. And I thought that's what I wanted back then. And then I start to unpack or just peel the onions that you see the layers that's underneath the chase of fluency. Especially like I came from a culture, there's no room for stuttering. So and like Tim says and Tiffany, they mentioned that how we meet our clients where they are. And I do think because like I came from that culture extremely shame, and now I'm at a fairly comfortable place, like being a person who stutters. And when I was involved with my Chinese stuttering community, when I work with the Chinese speech therapist, I still see that very fluency focused, especially the parents. Like when we were kids, there's no therapy, but now like because China, the economy is getting better, and the kids who stutter now, their parents are looking for help, but it's still very like fluency based. Like for me, I think like sometimes what's hard for me is like when the entire culture, the society like overwhelm message is fluency. And I still feel like sometimes probably maybe acceptance is it's even more precious, because it's like the kid, a stuttering kid by him or herself, they have nobody to speak for them. Even the parents came to us, it's in that mentality, fix my kid. So I think like what I'm struggling with is how do we empower the kid and make them feel, or the parents, or to educate the parents, like even though the air you breathe is telling stuttering is wrong, even though the water you swim is telling you stuttering is bad, but like how do you give them like some confidence? Yes, you, everything went against you, but at the same time, that self-love, that self-acceptance is even more important at this age. So when the Chinese kids or the parents are facing, so that's probably like to summarize what I'm saying is basically to meet their needs, to meet where they are, but at the same time, because we probably see more things, and sometimes I think like they think they wanted fluency, but at the same time I think like we show them what's actually more important, what matters is not just fluency. So I'm sorry, like my message is a little bit like too like messy. It's like stuttering, it's messy. So thank you.
Wow, those are all really fantastic points. I think a theme that I'm hearing here is like, maybe it's not about like, maybe it's not about like treating stuttering, or even like, the words treatment and the word therapy sort of imply that there's some change that has to happen, some some improvement, right? Like you are here, right? And we want to help get you here, right? And I think we can sort of reframe that to think about how can we capture the whole person and how can we help meet the client where they are, even like what Seth was saying, right? Like even if they are coming and they want to work on just fluency, how can we help them, or how can we be an ally to them and treat them like a human, right? As opposed to a client or, a person with this specific disorder, because I feel like that's a very common way that we approach things, is we see it as this profile of a person as opposed to seeing the person as a real human. Anna Paula had a question. She said she would love to hear what was the one thing that was different when you received meaningful therapy later in your lives. And if no one has an answer off the bat, I am happy to share something that just sort of popped into my mind, just like something quick. I think for me, something that changed was like I could finally be myself. For a long time, I was like, everybody just thought I was this like really quiet, shy person. And like, I'm actually quite talkative. And that was the thing that really changed. Like, I just could be me.
I mean, what everybody has said so far really resonates with me. They're very much going off of what Seth was saying. Like for most of my childhood, the emphasis, unfortunately, was just on fluencies and the listener's perspective of how I sounded and how they wanted me to sound, and the assumption that if I sound like them, then all of my problems will disappear. And it's interesting looking back on all of it. I'm going to try my best not to talk on this subject for the next 20 minutes, but like I have several stories that come to mind. Like I remember like my dad setting me to a fluency shaping camp for a 3-week intensive program when I was 16, again when I was 18, again when I was 20. And my dad's a dentist, and he somehow, I don't know if he had a patient who was stuttered or a patient who had a child who stuttered, but he somehow heard about this program from a patient. Oh yeah, it was, now I remember, the patient saw it on TV. It was the same program that and Annie Glenn went through back in the 90s. And my dad was told this is the cure for stuttering. And just that and the amount of pressure that put on me to come back and be fluent, and my speaking pattern definitely changed, but as most things like that, it has a bit of a plateau effect. I came back still just stuttering, kind of the trauma that caused with me, just the emphasis all around on fluency. And it wasn't until I randomly met a professor in the speech pathology department in college, Ken St. Louis, that really opened my eyes to this new way of thinking and kind of building a sense of community with others who stutter. I met Ken totally by chance as a resource for a paper I was writing on my English 102 class on stuttering, not because I had some, epiphany about myself and my stuttering, but because I knew it was an easy A for me to get on my paper. And my professor knew Ken and put me in touch with him, as I said, just as a resource. Like a week prior, I told my parents I was going to drop out of college and join the military. I remember being on academic probation and so on and so forth. And I went to meet Ken. And the day I met him, he also ran an adult support group for people who stutter. He said, "Oh, if you want no pressure, you can just hang out and join us for a group." It was in about 45 minutes, so I did, and I still remember it so vividly that the activity they had was role playing somebody else in your life, and I role played my dad, and it was just so life changing for me, and I didn't miss another group for the next like 7 years straight, and it was the most life changing moment of my life, and it really opened my eyes to what therapy could be, and kind of the stark difference from what I had experienced up until that point. The emphasis was was more so me as a person, and my thoughts and feelings and my lived experience up until that point.
Yeah, you only know what you know, right?
Yeah.
Uh, you know, similarly, I think my answer for that question would be the idea that I could speak and not want to not stutter never crossed my mind until I was like 25. Like, no one told me that that I didn't have to not stutter, right? Like, no one ever said that to me. No one ever like made it clear that stuttering more easily was a thing, and I could actually learn to uh, learn to really enjoy talking, which is weird. Learn to really enjoy talking via stuttering more easily, and still experiencing stuttering frequently, but rather than the struggle-filled train wrecks that they were, now they're little hiccups. That fundamental idea was similarly, I think, foundational to me, and you know certainly shattering, right, when I heard it for the first time and then learned it.
Yeah, I just want to add one comment here. I do think like just hearing a message that it's okay to stutter, and I think like it sounds so simple, but at the same time, like for many years, I think I only have one choice, that is fluency, and to just hear that it's okay to stutter, and now I have at least two choices. I can choose to be fluent, but at the same time, I can choose to stutter. I just feel like those simple messages that can have a huge impact on changing people's like situations. So
I think similar to what everyone else has said, the biggest thing for me in therapy was like being given like explicit permission to stutter, which I really had never been given. Like I swear my speech therapist told me it's okay to stutter like every session for like 2 years. And I needed that. Like I needed the constant, like truly she meant it. Like I needed it so much that for me to actually believe it. I feel like, yeah, therapy for me when it was helpful was a lot of like me just like crying and like processing my feelings about stuttering and about myself and about my life. It was very much like therapy, like counseling. I also think a lot of people who stutter benefit a lot from counseling. So plug there. I mean, like I have been in counseling for years, and I don't think I think stuttering therapy and counseling have been really helpful together. But yeah, I mean, I needed the unconditional like acceptance of my stuttering. Like I feel like throughout my life, I felt so much shame for everything. Like I felt shame for stuttering at all, for talking, whatever. And then once I started to like be more in the community and like in speech therapy, I felt shame for stuttering badly, like blocking and having secondaries or whatever the perception of that is. Like when I was in grad school, I feel like I was just harped on for like, you're not stuttering well, you're not stuttering well enough, you know, whatever, you're not a good model. Like, and so I feel like I just had, and then I feel like for years I felt shame for being any degree of covert, having any feelings that are negative. And so I think for me, therapy, but also a lot of personal insight and personal like just reflection as a therapist, as a person, has led me to just try to take away the shame, and like with my clients especially, and like just say like stuttering is so hard, and like being a person who stutters is so hard, and the choices you make are totally understandable in any capacity, and nothing about you or how you talk is wrong. There are ways that are easier, but they're not, like it makes sense that you do those things. And I feel like it's taken me years to feel that way about myself, and it's still a process, but therapy definitely started that. But I think this is where like I lean in a little bit more like against fluency than I think some people, because I think that like it's really easy to give people a false choice and be like, oh, like we'll just like, you know, here's some strategies to make you fluent. But I think if I were to be given that and I were to like buy into that, I would just then feel like a failure. Like I would still send the message that how I talk is wrong. And I don't know, I think we just have to be really careful in like making sure that like it's a little bit like, sorry, whenever I have a long stutter, my ADHD just like kicks in. I like forget everything I'm saying. I really didn't know what I was saying.
You were
Yeah, I
talking
was forgetting.
about potentially like giving people this false choice. So like you can have fluency or, you know, yeah. Does that help?
Thank you, Courtney. It's like stuttering is the worst sometimes. Like having the intersectionality of like being neurodivergent and stuttering is so hard sometimes. So like my working memory is not good enough for stuttering. Anyway, yes, thank you. I feel like stuttering is a lot like trauma, and like treating it needs to be a lot like treating trauma. Like you have to repress, like you cannot repress it. You have to process it. Like you have to really feel the things you feel in it, and then you can make changes, you know, or like that's like a separate thing. You can't just like, you know, align with someone's like repression or like, you know, like avoidance. Like you have to like let them sit with it and sit through how it impacts you and process it. So that's very much how I feel like I've had to go through that like deeply, both in therapy, speech therapy and in counseling, in order to like be okay.
I just wanted to say one thing real quick off of something that Tiffany just said. Like I'm sure we're all going to keep on saying this over and over that we all keep on resonating with what the other Papan the Nolet said. But like it's to to feel what you feel, to acknowledge what you feel, but then give yourself permission to feel what you feel, no matter what those feelings are. And that is something that I still work on to this day. Cause like I went through years of feeling shame, and then I would start to feel guilt from kind of falling back into old habits. And then it would start to snowball. And I just kind of had to take a step back and be like, it's, I'm a human being, just like everybody else. I have to give myself permission to sometimes feel those feelings of shame and feel those feelings of guilt, right? Something that also really helped me a lot from the speech therapy I used to have to what I have now is just really paying attention to what is my own self-talk and what am I telling myself through everyday occurrences. And it's something that I talk a lot about with the children that I work with. Like what are you telling yourself before that moment of stuttering? What are you telling yourself during that moment and then after, right? Because those change drastically. And just what is that self-talk? I would have a tremendous amount of negative self-talk no matter what the speaking engagement was. So that was also really helpful for me to realize that as well.
Yeah, I think something that I've always thought about is like, it's great to value acceptance, right? It's great to have that in mind, right? But knowing that not everybody is there. And allowing people to have that space, and even like understanding that like there is no peak, right? Like there is no acceptance, like, okay, I have reached this place where I am just accepting, right? Like I think all of us will, I mean, I will speak for myself, right? And that like I am at a good place with my stuttering, but at the same time, like I have days where it's just really hard and I feel shame and I feel guilt and I don't like being a person who stutters, and that is okay. So like it's okay to sort of have those contradictory thoughts. And I think our job as SLPs is to help people understand that, right? And to not put them in this box that they have to choose between like working on fluency goals and working on acceptance goals. Lost the question that I had. Okay, Amy, I know you didn't have a question there, but I just wanted to touch on what you said, which was it feels so hard for you to figure out how to help parents understand what we're saying. So maybe we can phrase that as a question to the panel, like, and I know this is a big question, but how do you get parents on board?
I think that something that has been said, I think Seth said it first, is like meeting people where they are. And I think we have to do it, parents, like just as much as kids. A lot of parents, I mean, almost every parent of a kid who stutters, I feel like, is in a certain place when they come to therapy. And it's a place of like anxiety, and they're thinking 10 years ahead of now. They're like, my kid is 2, he started stuttering a week ago and he's never going to be successful because he stutters. They're just so worried that like I always have like a box of tissues in my evaluation room, because pretty much every parent of a little kid who stutters has come into the eval and they've cried, because it's such a weight on them. And so I think it's really, really important for us to see parents, because a lot of what they're saying, we have to like read what they're really saying. So like, for example, like a lot of parents think it's their fault. And like a lot of what they're saying is projecting their own guilt and shame and, you know, anxiety about their future and about the fact that they think they caused this to be what it is. And so I think, you know, saying affirmations like, it's not your fault. There's literally nothing you could have done. Like, you don't have that much control, you know? I think that's really helpful, just to like hear that, like let that guilt be removed. And then also, you know, meeting them where they are, like I said at the beginning, like you can't just like the easiest way to have a parent drop you as an SLP who stutters is to be like, well, I'm not going to cure your kid stuttering, and you need to get over that. Like, I mean, you can't like dig in too hard. You know, I think it's like hearing them and being like, yeah, like it must be so stressful. You must be so worried. Like, I hear that you're worried about them being bullied, you know, like, and, you know, affirming what you can do. Like you can give lots of like support through that. Like you can like bully perfect kid, and like you can like support kids who are having trouble. You can support parents. Like there's, you know, kids can be successful as people who stutter. You know, and like parents just want to know that that's okay. Like a lot of times I think the only path they see is that like, you have to fix my kid stuttering. You have to make it go away so that they're going to be okay. But if you like dig a little deeper, like we do with kids in therapy, then they come around and like, you can see what they're really asking, and meet those needs. And yeah, I mean, there's lots of different other like things you can do to help, like other resources, like meeting other parents and like meeting older kids who stutter, and seeing models of kids who are amazing and stutter, adults who are amazing and stutter. That stuff goes far, but I do think it's just important that we listen deeply with what parents are saying and feeling.
Tim, you go ahead.
No. You go ahead.
Thank you, such a gentleman. But please don't forget what you are going to say. So I just love everything I hear. And Tiffany, I think that everything you shared, I can totally see that's actually coming from the clinical practice. You're working with the parents. Yeah, and I do think like sometimes like when I work with the Chinese parents, like they are facing that like double pressure. It's like the pressure coming from themselves, that all that guilt, or did I, you know, like give this stuttering to my child, or like my reactions make their stuttering so much worse, and they worry about their environment too, that the cultural social aspect, because they know like how people who stutter were treated unfairly or discriminated in a Chinese society. And I think like the parents, they are panicking, like, but like Tiffany, you were saying, it's so important that like we hear their fear. And at the same time, I do feel like sometimes the parents are trying so hard to want to remove that pain from the kid, almost like remove that stuttering part away from them, and then they don't have to face that fear. And I do think like sometimes what works with me communicating with their parents is that let them see that resilience of their child being a person who stutters, and how that stuttering made them stronger. And I just think sometimes parents were so just focused on all those fear, all those negative side, and instead of saying actually stuttering was there to serve a purpose. And sometimes like I share my own personal experience. I was telling them if I didn't stutter, I would be just like another Chinese person among 1.4 billion people. But because of my stuttering, I feel like I had this such unique experience as a person who stutters, and not other people had that strength or that resilience, because we had to, like, every single time we opened our mouth, it's courage. So I think to mention that to parents, to give them hope. So yeah, Tim.
I was just gonna say, Seth had mentioned earlier that kids who have been through speech therapy, know what they have been told, right? And parents, a lot of the times, know what they've been told. When I think back just about my own personal experience with my parents, especially with my dad, and with, this fluency shaping camps and all of the like pretty significant arguing we would have throughout middle school and high school, and especially I really look back at it, and it took me years, but I finally realized, like, my dad, as all parents, wanted, when it comes down to it, parents want two main things. They want their children to be happy, they want their children to be successful in life. And children who stutter can achieve both of those things no matter how disfluent they are. And I don't necessarily agree with the methods of which my dad used when I was growing up, but his heart was in the right place. And it took me a very long time, to really understand that and build a level of acceptance with that. A child's journey with stuttering does not run parallel to a parent of a child who stutters journey with stuttering. And sometimes the parents are a bit further than the child, sometimes the child's a bit further than the parents, and sometimes that can swap just depending upon what's going on, and that is okay. Just as we said, to give our children who stutter permission to feel how they feel, give the parents permission to feel how they feel as well. And everybody's going to have their own way of going about things. Some of our parents may be a bit more aggressive in their speaking to us, but I always try and keep in mind they are terrified, and they just truly want what's best for their child.
The only thing I think I can add is, what I'm hearing, right? Not just related to this question, I guess, is that, not only should we allow how we feel, how parents feel, you know, um, we should also normalize those feelings, right? Those thoughts and feelings and fears and anxieties and worries, whatever you call them, are normal, right? And if we normalize them, we take away the stigma of them, and we also take away um, some of the negative thoughts and feelings that then cycle on top of those too, right? So like when families share things like, hey, I'm worried about X, Y, and Z, or right, like that's normal, right? Like it'd be weird if you weren't worried about this as a parent, right? I think when we normalize that, it can only help change, right, and set the stage for change in therapy. Similarly too, right, 15, 20 minutes ago when we were talking about, this common thing that happens in self-help, right, which is really interesting, where like you're thrown in this world where stuttering, where where suddenly stuttering's okay, right? And then like, it becomes you and it becomes your whole identity. And and it's almost like, it's this like wedding zone of, hey, I can do this and everything's fine, right? Well, no, it's not fine. Like you still have to work through all this, right? And that naturally sets up feelings of guilt and shame, I think, when you can't hit that. But simultaneously too, right? Like we should normalize that. We should also normalize not wanting to actually live in that world either, right? You're an individual and you're allowed to live your life as you want. And if you don't, you know, you know, what, you know, you sometimes not wanting to stutter is okay, right? And we should allow that and normalize it too.
Thank you all for those great insights. There was another question in the chat. Whoops, I passed it. Stephanie said that she works in public school with middle schoolers and high schoolers, and she says that many of her fluency students are very avoidant. They don't want to do anything involving stuttering, and they are here because they have to be here, or they've been told that they are supposed to go to speech. And she wants to know what is the best way to make therapy meaningful in these situations.
I think it goes back to a lot of what we've been saying. Why, like, when you would be surprised, or perhaps not surprised, based upon that question, how many kids come to speech therapy because it's something they're supposed to do, but they don't really understand why, or they don't want to be there, right? And to the last part of the question, where it's like, how can you make speech meaningful to them? That sounds like a fantastic question to ask them, right? What do they want out of speech? What has their speech therapy been up until this point? Has that been successful for them? Why or why not, right? There's been so many times where I just have met middle school or high school, or at times elementary age kids, and I say, "Oh, tell me about what you're doing in speech. Tell me about what you used to do with your old speech to teachers." And majority say, "Oh, we worked on taking a deep breath. We worked on our slow breaths or easing into words. We worked on my bumpy speech," right? And you have these kids who are adolescents but haven't even been taught the vocabulary to be able to, and express and verbalize their lived experience, right? And it's just and I know we keep saying it, it's really just about meeting them where they're at and just trying to probe a bit, but not to too much, because obviously if if I had a speech therapist ask 16-year-old me, "Tim, how do you feel about your speech?" I would have a couple choice words for them, right? And like, and so I truly fully understand that. But I think it's so powerful to ask them, what do they want to get out of speech, that therapy. And there's going to be times when a child may say, "I don't want to be in speech," and there's things that you want to work on with that child, but they may not be in a place to really work on those things. And it is okay to pull back a bit and give that child time. And sometimes that is a very difficult conversation with parents to have as well.
So well said, Tim. I just want to add something to this. It's like sometimes I do feel like speech therapists, like we were trained in our program, is basically because all the other things we work with, right? No matter like artic, like all this is almost like you are there to change a thing. You're there to like make them speak differently, and then that okay. But like stuttering is, it's different. It's all almost like the things you're doing with other group of clients. It seems like when it works with the children or the teenagers or adults who stutter, is different. And I definitely see that's very challenging for the speech language pathologists, especially the beginning ones. So I think at the bottom line there is, how do you actually put your shoes into your clients, put your feet into your client's shoes? Sounds like those things we talk about are so simple, but when we actually use it or when we're doing it, for example, how about the speech therapist when you are with a child and you openly stutter in a public place? Just maybe make a phone call, trying to do a voluntary stuttering with the child, and to not just tell them your stuttering is okay, but it's more like showing them stuttering is okay. So I definitely feel like things all we know what we should do. Sometimes we just have that fear of actually doing it. So yeah.
I can go if you don't want to go. Seth, I feel like you always go last, and so I was gonna like let you not go last.
No, I really don't have any thoughts on this, so go ahead.
Okay, maybe I'll generate some for you. Yeah, so I think I agree with a lot of what everyone said, but especially a lot of my response was very similar to what Tim was going to say, what Tim said. I think that there are essentially two types of kids who fall into this box of like, I don't want to be in speech therapy. So there's the kids who they're really repressed, like their feelings are really repressed, and they don't want to go there. They don't want to talk about it. It's so shameful. And in some ways, I think those are easier because like there's so many like techniques and like approaches that you can use to like dig and like help them feel safe to like explore. And I feel like that's been a lot of my kids where like the parents are like, you can try. You know, I had one kid that I've seen for like 4 years now, and the parents were like, he's had horrible speech therapy. He does not want to come. He does not have any buy-in. But he's willing to try 5 sessions with you. So good luck. And like, he was like, great. I mean, like, he's like one of my like favorite clients, but it was like, I mean, he had some weird therapy. I mean, I essentially the way he described it is like he had like prompt therapy, like people are like touching his lips. Like, I'm like, what? And so even just like me being like, that's so weird. He'd be like, he was like, oh, okay. Like, I kind of like you. Like, you also think that's weird. You're not going to do that to me, you know? So some of it is just like being different than what they had before. And, you know, I think it's just so important immediately to be like, what do you want out of therapy? Like, we're a team. Like, I try to be like I have no skin in this game. Like, my only job is to support you. And like, you know, whatever that looks like. And, you know, like some kids, like, they're not ready. And so like, they're like, if you want to support me, make my parents stop sending me to speech therapy. And I'm like, okay, let's do it. Like, and a lot of times that leads to them wanting to come to speech therapy later, you know, but sometimes it is like, I just discharged a kid and I had to push and push and push against his parents. but he really was okay. And I think that's the other box that I was talking about earlier, is like some kids just are in speech therapy because the school speech therapist just keeps them in, or like their parents just want them to stop stuttering. And so really, like, once you start having the conversation with the kid about like why they don't want to be in speech therapy, why they don't find it meaningful, you get the answer to that question, you know. And like if their answer is like, I don't care that I stutter, I just want to go play soccer and this is boring, I'm like, okay, like, you know, I don't know, like a lot of me and this kid I just discharged, we just like basically I was like, okay, so here's all the things that, you know, might bother you. And he's like, no, I'm good. I'm like, okay, great. Like, let's find a way to teach your parents that, like, that it's okay. And we did. And I don't see him anymore. But another thing that's really important in those cases is the way you tell parents. Like, I try to tell parents, like, the therapy is a revolving door for people who stutter. And if we push and push and push right now, the kids are not going to want to come back. So if you got to think about longevity, like right now, they're really okay. Like here's like with this family, I literally did the Oasis with this kid, even though he wasn't due for a reeval. And I was like, look, he has 0, like his scores are all 1. He's really okay. And proving it to them, but also being like, look, he's 9 right now. Like his super supportive school, like later that might change. And we want him to come back, you know? And so I had that conversation with the kid of like, you know, sometimes you might feel worse and that's okay. And I want you to not hate me, you know, I want you to think that I'm an ally for you. And I think that's, and longevity is important. So yeah, but I think you're a dig.
I think the comment that Stephanie made in the chat about when to discharge, I think that is a really good question. I don't really believe in that word in the sense of like, I don't, you know, you don't discharge people from psychotherapy, right? It's like you can always come back because it's something that you need and you're not cured. And it's just, you know, and yeah, I've had clients that I've seen for years. I've had clients who I saw when they were 7, 8, 9, and now they're back at 12 and 13, right? So, you know, we are always here for them. So I tend to like slowly discharge, if that's the word that you want to use, in the sense of like going from meeting once a week to once every 2 weeks to then once a month. And I always sort of phrase it as like, if you are willing to, you know, to try this on your own, let's try, but knowing that I am always here should they want to come back, so they don't feel so alone, and that I just sort of like nix that relationship.
It's really interesting too, and a bit of a paradox in that it's typically like the children, like how do I phrase that? The most pushback I get to dismiss a child who stutters are typically children who may be stuttering more overtly, and they're not meeting whatever sort of arbitrary fluency criteria that's being set for them. But then you have these kids who may not be where their stuttering may not be as observable, but have profound impact. And those same people who pushed with the first kid say, oh well, this kid's fine. I'm like, no. This is why we all have been saying like and it's just, there's just such a stark difference between the person who stutters experience versus the listeners and experience. And then I just want to say real quick, somebody was saying how it's so beneficial for children who stutter to see somebody else stutter in situations too. And we as speech therapists who stutter have the luxury of showing that to the children that we work with without really trying at all. And that's something that fluent speech that therapists don't, really have the luxury of. But obviously you can do pseudo stuttering with kids. One of the most meaningful moments with a child that I was working with last year, she loved to come to speech, but mostly because she wanted to play this game that she loved to play. And she always, I would always try and talk about stuttering, and she would just kind of roll her eye at me. But I knew she would always pay attention when I would really start to block. She would just stop what she was doing, just watch me. And I had this moment last year where the way my office was set up, my back was to my door and she was facing my door, and we were in the middle of our session, and my vice principal walked in and to ask me a question. So I turned around and she asked me a question, and I was of course stuttering while I was speaking to her. And the girl's eyes got really big, and my vice principal left, and the girl looked at me and said, "Wow, not even the vice principal cared that you stuttered, and you stuttered a lot." And I was like, yeah, I did. And she didn't care. And I'm telling you, it was like a light switch just went off. And without me even helping her with it at all, she started to talk to her friends about stuttering. She gave a presentation totally prompted about stuttering to her class. She did the morning announcements at school, and I swear it had nothing to do with what I was talking to her about for months. And it was just the act of seeing me stutter to somebody from a place of the authority. And that was a really meaningful moment for her.
I want to piggyback off of that because I do think that is so important. A lot of times, our clients, especially the younger ones, just aren't always ready to talk at a high level about their feelings, or I don't know, to talk about stuttering. And it's very easy as an SLP who stutters in this specific way. Everything else is hard, but it is so easy to be an SLP who stutters in the way that we're always desensitizing our clients. You should see my soap notes. If sometimes I'll have a session where I feel like I didn't do anything except stutter. And I'll be like, normalization and desensitization of stuttering, in my objective. It's yeah, I was, but I think that as fluent SLPs, because most people in this room probably aren't people who stutter, I think there has to be other ways that you normalize it. And so I'm a big fan of physical space things. I now, especially now that I have my own office, I'm looking into all the posters and stuff. And I just think it's so meaningful to have physical reminders in your space of yeah, stuttering is safe here. Stuttering is welcome here. Feelings are okay here. I know my speech therapist, my therapist that I found helpful, she had a poster that said it's okay to stutter. And it was right in my face. I was looking, it was behind her. And so I had to see it every time I looked at her. And that was so helpful. And so even just physical reminders that you can use to create an open and welcoming and affirming space are also helpful.
Sorry, can I just say one? Can I just say one more thing real fast, just going off of what Tiffany just said? With that same student, and there's another boy that I work with, and they're in the same grade. I've really been trying to talk up like Nash stuttering aware this week, to which they both want absolutely nothing to do with and I talk about, oh, we can talk to your classes right now. And so I said, well, why don't I offered, oh well, I will be there with you. So then they said, oh well, maybe we will then. And then I said, okay, how about this? I will let you all choose the way in which I stutter and how long I should stud and how long I should stud to turf 4. And they have never loved something more. And I'm going to be doing that either tomorrow or on Friday or on Friday. But just the act of them finding in enjoyment in finding like humor and just being able to laugh at things like that is really self-healing too. So I really can't state enough, as Tiffany shared as well. Sometimes it's great for them just to kind of be close by or observe things.
Thank you so much. We have about 5 minutes left. Does anybody have any final comments, or do any of the audience members have any more questions? How about this? What's your favorite National Stuttering Awareness Week activity to use with clients?
I can share something. So today, so I do lead a local NSA chapter. So for this week, we actually just went to a Mexican restaurant before I log on to the meeting, and we were just like all openly stutter, and we have a member. His name is Bob. He's so adorable. Like he print out a card and he wear it like around his neck, says I stutter, this is Stuttering Awareness Week, and trying to just use this small moments to like in public, like to normalize stuttering, talk about stuttering. So food and stuttering, that's my favorite thing. I'm Chinese at the end of the day, so yeah.
So this is really weird. So I preface this with, this is weird. About 6 months ago, I was told by my friends that when I text them, my stuttering shows up in the texts, where like I'll throw in extra like letters and words, and it's like stuttered text, which is fascinating to think about. So like for the past 6 months, I've been not even like reading my text through and making sure it's coherent. I just send it, right? And I see that as a way of advocating for stuttering even via text.
I love that, Seth. I definitely like steal my friends' phones and like rename myself like with like a stutter. But then like my friends, especially because I'm covert, like my friends will always like later they're like, why does your name say like Tut Tiffany? Like I don't know the context of that, but it's fun to like mess around a little bit. So my favorite like national stuttering awareness thing, my favorite thing I've ever done, because every year I try to do something. This year I'm like a little bit on the like, I'm kind of pulling it together. I'm like wearing t-shirts every day. Like, I don't know, I'm not doing as much this year. Last year though, it was like my favorite. So I had like a bunch of my kids and teenagers like do something and let them be creative and explore with like what that feels good to them. And it was the ones who like were more into it who did it. And then I like posted, when I got permission from the parents, I posted on the NSA, because I lead a family chapter in my area. I posted in the family chapter page and like sent these emails every day. And it was like so cool because the kids were like, I mean, these were already kids. I think I'm just like so, and like I so deeply admire, but the things they said for this purpose were just incredible. And then it like each day, like a lot of like the same kids like and their families got all the emails. So by the end, like the kids who did the end of the week, their messages were like extraordinary. And so still like a year later, like I'm like sending those videos out to like parents, especially little kids, like parents of little kids who I'm like, look at these teenagers who are like saying like, this is like a TED talk, like it's amazing. And so that's been like, I think my favorite thing, but I think it's also good just to like, you know, try to like meet kids where they are, like always, like we've said that 1,000 times this meeting, and just do like what makes them feel good. Like I love doing like challenges in therapy. It's probably my favorite activity. It, like similar to what Tim, you were saying, like my kids like love giving me like really weird challenges. And then like we have like a challenge by choice rule where I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. Like that's too weird for me or whatever. And like we have to modify it. But they'll like do so many things like with like desensitization because of that, because they watch me do things that they think is like really stupid and like they think it's hilarious and like, you know, and so like that's been like something that I'm doing this week is like the kids will be like they'll pick something that they think is like awareness and like they'll challenge me to do something awareness and I'll challenge them. Like this week one of my kids is in France and because he's from France and he and I are ordering the same food. So he told me like the best French restaurant in Seattle, so I have to go there and order this food and stutter and also pronounce it terribly because I don't speak French, which he thinks is hilarious. And then he's ordering it in France and he's gonna stutter. And so like I'm actually really excited about that because like we're doing the same thing. But I never thought he would be open to that. Or like one of my kids made a petition on like change.org as a joke, as like he was like, I petition that International Stuttering Awareness Day should be a day off because it'll make people who are fluent like people who stutter more and change the world about stuttering. And like he wrote this whole thing as a joke, and then it was actually kind of awesome. And so like even just like we just leaned into like being silly, and it ended up being like really cool actually. So I'll have to have you guys sign the petition.
I don't necessarily have something in particular for National Stuttering Awareness Week, but I love doing things that gets kids laughing while stuttering, right? And one of the most healing parts of my life is finding the humor for some of the experiences that I've put myself in, just out of the fear of stuttering in different situations, but like I've done things where where you know we're kind of like under the topic that stuttering is so misunderstood worldwide and all of that stuff. I will sometimes will pull up like voice to text on my laptop, so we all start to stutter to see what absolutely insane sentence it comes up with, and I typically always have kids just laughing they're regularly added to where then prompts them to want to stutter more, to then see like what what is actually going to pop out. So anytime I can have a activity when kids are laughing while stuttering, I always think is a success.
That's awesome. Well, thank you all so much for your fabulous insights. This was fantastic. I really, really loved hearing your stories and your insights. So thank you deeply for your time.